The diner was always coldest before sunrise, when the neon sign outside flickered in tired breaths and the hum of a distant highway sang to no one in particular, and in those quiet hours a young waitress named Elora wiped down the counter with the same determination she used to keep her life from falling apart. She was 23, silver-eyed, exhausted, and stubborn enough to believe tomorrow would eventually get better, even if today refused to cooperate, and in that tiny roadside diner. The same one truckers, night shifters, and broken travelers passed through without ever bothering to learn its name. She found her rhythm of survival. She was pouring coffee into cracked mugs when the front bell chimed with a frail metallic whine and an old man shuffled inside, bundled in an oversized beige coat that had seen more winters than he had strength to endure, and his appearance was quiet, humble, the sort of presence that made no demands on the world. He sat near the window where the dawn would eventually climb, hands trembling as he tried to warm them against the coffee cup she placed before him without being asked, because he never ordered, never spoke more than a thank you, and never reached for the menu. His name was Samuel, though she only learned that weeks later, and at first she only sensed that he was hungry in that silent way people are when they've learned dignity doesn't feed you, but losing it feels worse than starvation. So Elora pretended the kitchen was short on storage and, accidentally, sent out plates too full for customers, then boxed the leftovers and handed them to the old man with the casual grace of someone who had no interest in embarrassing him. He would smile, just once, softly, before shuffling back out into the early morning, and day after day this became ritual, the nameless man, the shared silence, the uncharged meal that no one else noticed, except maybe the owner Mr. Callahan, who pretended the receipts balanced because he preferred compassion over profit, though he would never admit it aloud. But compassion wasn't cheap for Elora. She was paying off medical bills for a mother whose lungs warred against the world, juggling overdue rent, and saving what was left of her dignity from debt collectors who treated kindness as a liability, and yet, for reasons she could never articulate, Samuel became part of the fragile ecosystem of her mornings. She didn't know where he slept, though once she saw him huddled under the awning behind the fuel station during a thunderstorm, clutching a small duffel bag like it contained the last pieces of his life, and she watched from the diner's window feeling an ache press into her ribs until she marched leftovers across the parking lot and pressed them into his hands, getting drenched in the process. He simply nodded, murmured, "You're a good girl," and she walked away pretending the rain, not her eyes, blurred her vision. Then, suddenly, the mornings felt incomplete without him. When he didn't show she worried, when he returned she pretended she wasn't relieved, and the regular customers, truckers, mechanics, nurses fresh off night shift, took silent note of the way she lingered near his table, refilled his cup too often, and folded napkins with unusual precision, though no one teased her because the diner belonged to people who respected the unspoken battles strangers fought. Weeks passed and winter sank into the bones of the town, the highway iced over, deliveries ran late, and on one especially brutal Tuesday the old man came in with a bruise on his cheekbone that no scarf could hide, and Elora's heart flared with anger sharp enough to cut through her carefully practiced composure, though Samuel only shook his head when she tried to ask if he was all right, whispering, "Just life catching up, child," as though the world owed him hardship and he had no right to complain. That night, long after the last customer left, Elora searched the parking lot again, but Samuel was gone, and a knot formed in her chest she couldn't wrestle loose. The next morning he returned, weaker than before, his hands trembling so badly she had to steady his coffee cup for him, and this time she didn't bother pretending. She slid him a plate of eggs and toast without a bill, then an extra sandwich wrapped in parchment for later, and Samuel's eyes softened, the kind of softness reserved for memories of lives long past. "Nobody ever just helps anymore," he said quietly, as if confessing to the empty diner rather than speaking to her, and she shrugged as though kindness was habit, not sacrifice, though she knew the truth looked more like overdraft fees and skipped dinners on her own part. What Elora didn't know, what no one in the diner knew, was that Samuel had once been a man who owned 3 restaurants, a home in the hills, and a family that adored him until the economy ate his savings like wolves devour bone and flesh, until illness stole his wife, until grief swallowed his ambition, and until pride prevented him from asking for help. He lived now on a pension too small to feed him and a past too heavy to forget, and he walked through life like a ghost no one bothered to Remember, except for one young waitress who treated him as though he still belonged to the world. Slowly, their conversations bloomed in fragments, stories about the highway, rumors about the weather, and once a confession that he never stopped believing people were better than the world wanted them to be, and in return she told him nothing of her own burdens, because she believed suffering was currency spent quietly. But each morning the diner filled a little more with the sense that something unspoken tethered these two together, a girl who refused to stop hoping and a man who had lost everything hope once promised. And then, one morning, after 3 months of routine and kindness disguised as leftovers, Samuel didn't come. The bell never chimed, the corner booth stayed empty, and the sun rose without its quiet companion, and the absence gnawed at Elora with a force she didn't expect, as though something vital had gone missing. She waited. 1 day. 2 days. 3. By the 4th, she was checking alleys, shelters, and benches as if searching for a misplaced chapter of her life. She found nothing but winter and the echo of worry. And then, just as she convinced herself it was hopeless, the morning of the 5th day arrived with a strange tension in the air, the diner humming low with conversation, coffee machines rattling, and then, without warning, 2 black SUVs rolled up outside, sleek and spotless, engines idling like beasts ready to move, and every head in the diner turned toward the windows. Nothing in the town ever attracted attention. Nothing ever arrived in SUVs. And before Elora could piece together what any of it meant, the doors opened. When the diner door swung open, a gust of winter air rushed in behind 2 sharply dressed men whose polished shoes clicked across the old linoleum floor like punctuation marks in an otherwise quiet morning. They scanned the room with the precision of men trained to observe, their eyes lingering on the regulars only long enough to determine they were not a threat. And then one of them approached the counter where Elora stood frozen with a half-filled coffee pot trembling ever so slightly in her hand. "We're looking for the young woman who fed a man named Samuel Reed every morning," the taller one said, voice firm but strangely respectful, and the diner fell into a hush heavy enough to hear dishwasher cycles and heartbeats.